Hi everyone, I'm Jack from Sheffield Racing and welcome to another SOLIDWORKS tutorial video. In today's tutorial I'm going to be working through the 2006 Model Mania Challenge. The Model Mania Challenges are a really good way of developing and demonstrating your CAD skills. Each year SOLIDWORKS provide a couple of part drawings and you have to create the part in the best way possible. The first part drawing, as I'll show you, is sort of the main part itself, and then the second drawing is a modification to the first part. We'll add a link to this website in the description below, but here you can see each year there's a different part, and there's a phase 1 drawing and a phase 2 drawing. So for the 2006 part, which we're going to be working through today, here's the phase 1 drawing. As I said, this has got all the dimensions to create this part here, and then the phase 2 drawing is some sort of modifications to the first part. So the modifications for this part are the draft features. So we've got one here, and then we've got one on this face here of 15 degrees. So I'll start by creating a new part within SOLIDWORKS. I'm going to be creating a sketch which has this sort of profile here. So it's going to use this radius here, this radius here, this radius which doesn't require a dimension because it's tangential to this radius, and this 92mm distance between the two edges. So I'm going to sketch that on the right hand plane. I'm going to use the center point arc using the origin as the center to create the first radius. So we've got first radius, and then I'm going to use the tangent arc for the other two. We've got one there, and then one there. So I'm going to add a relation that has this edge here, the center of this radius, the origin, and then the edge of this radius, and I'm going to create a horizontal relation. If I then add some dimensions, we've got this radius is 32mm. This radius as 20mm. I just add this dimension here, which is 92. So yeah, you can see that the still is not fully defined, and that's because this point here can move about. So if I add a relation between that and the origin, if I add a vertical relation, that should fully define the sketch. Yep. Now the last thing I need to do is close the sketch so I can extrude it. And there we have our sketch. If I go Features, Extrude Boss, and I'm going to do this as a mid-plane extrude. So it does it equal distances from the plane. The dimension for this is 32mm. If I go back, I can add 32. So we've got sort of the main body of our part. I'm just going to change this to plain white, so when I show the sketch of this, which we're going to use for the next part, it's a bit more clear. So I'm now going to create this 32mm radius here, which you can see is on the top of the face. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can do this by surfacing, or you could use a swept cut. We haven't covered surfacing yet, so I'm going to use the swept cut method. We need to create a profile and a path. We can use these edges here as the path, so we need to create the profile. I'm going to do that by creating a sketch on the top plane. And I'm going to use the center point arc with the center being the origin again. I'm just going to draw that. If I click that and this point here, if I use the midpoint, you can see that now if I extend this line, it'll be symmetrical around that right hand plane point. And then lastly, to fully define the sketch, if I just make that coincident with this edge, there we've got our sort of profile that we're going to use to cut. If I make it normal, you can see that we want to cut this part here and this part here. So I need to close that sketch. I'll do that by doing that outside the part body. So I just need to define that. So if I do that as this here, any dimension will work. I'll just make that 7. And click OK. Exit the sketch. So now I've got my profile, which is this sort of sketch here that we just created, and then the path, which I need to select. So if I go into features, and I'm doing this as a swept cut, if I select this for the profile, right, I'm now going to show you what would happen if I select this edge for the path straight away. It's going to be incorrect, and I'll show you the way sort of correcting that. So if I select that, it's going to select the whole of that sketch, but we don't want to remove material in this direction here on the bottom edge. So if I clear the selection, if I then right click in this box and use the selection manager, this lets me be more precise with the selection. So I can select that radius, and that radius, then click OK. The preview will now show exactly what we want. So it's going to remove all the material within this yellow box section here. So if I click OK, we've then got the shape that we want. If I go ahead and hide that sketch. The next part we need to add is this round section here, the dome bit that you can see here and here. So it's got a radius of 30 mil. I'll go ahead and do that by using a revolved boss base. So if I create a sketch on the top plane, click the top plane, create a sketch, Control 8 to bring it normal to the screen. And then if I'm going to just draw a circle with the center as the origin, click anywhere and drag it and add a dimension. That is, as you can see from the drawing, it was 30 mil, so the diameter is going to be 60. I can change that diameter to a radius by right clicking and display as radius. So then we've got a fully defined sketch. I'm just going to chop it in half to create a semicircle by using the trim tool. So we could draw an axis line to sort of revolve this around, but we can also just select this edge. So I'll show you how to do that. So if I go revolve boss base, and then the axis of revolution, we want to be this line here. So I'm going to revolve that semicircle around that axis. And we don't want it to be a full 360, so we want that to be 180 degrees. So if I just replace that with 180, then click OK. You can see it's starting to take shape a bit now. So the next thing I'm going to add is the sort of fillets here. So we've got 2 fillets that are 4 mil, so that's this one here and this one here, and then another 2 here that are 4 mil, so that's this one here and this one here. So if I go to fillet, I'm going to do this as a constant size fillet, and it needs to be 4 millimeters. If I change that to 4, and then select this edge here first, and this edge here, click OK. I then want to add the second fillets, which are also 4 mil, to this edge here and this edge here. Click OK. So you can see that looks pretty much the same as this here. If you wanted to reorder those fillets, it would slightly change the geometry. You can see this section here will change. But that's not the way we want it to be. We want it the original way. So we just order those back. So I'm now going to create the 4 mil wall thickness, which you can see here, 4 mil wall thickness typical. So I'm going to use the shell feature to create that. If I go features, shell, I need to select the face that I want to remove, which is going to be the bottom face. I then need to set the thickness. So if I set the thickness as 4 mil, you can see if we remove that, that it's also kept these sort of fillets. So if I'd have done the shell feature before these fillets, we wouldn't have had this radius here or here. The reason that we don't have a radius here is because that's a 4 mil rad and this is a 4 mil thickness. So the center of that radius here is going to be on this point. whereas we do have a radius here because that's sort of an internal rad. So to keep the 4mm thickness, we need a radius here, which is going to be 8mm. I've done a sort of demonstration of this. I'll show you that quickly. If I minimise this, open this sketch. So here, if I were to show, this is sort of a 4mm thickness sort of racetrack profile. If within the sketch, if I was to create a fillet on the outer edge, like an external fillet of 4mm, you can see that we've got a sort of constant 4mm thickness as that goes around, and that point there is the centre of that radius, so that is always 4mm. So if I've got an internal radius and I want that to be 4mm, you can see there that we'll have to add a radius to the outside to maintain this constant 4mm wall thickness. If I add a fillet to the outside, that will not be a constant wall thickness of 4mm. So in order to get that constant wall thickness, we need to have the original radius plus the wall thickness. So it's going to be 4 plus 4, which is 8. Oops, 8. So you can see now, if we've got a external radius, we wouldn't need to add the additional because the wall thickness is constant. If we've got an internal radius, we need to add it for the external radius. But because we've used the shell feature, it's already done that for us. If I go back to the part, I'll show you what I mean. So there we've got an outside radius where it's not needed to create a fillet on the inside. And here we've got an inside radius, so it's created the 8mm radius for us on the outside. So the next feature that we're going to add is the ribs. So there is multiple ways of doing this. We can create this section by itself and extrude that down and then add these ribs here, or we can draw the whole profile and do it in one step. So I'll show you that method of doing it. So one thing to note, if I go back to that, is that the ribs have an offset of 4mm. So one way of doing that is to create a sketch, to create a plane to sketch on, which is offset from the top plane. So if I select the top plane, click reference geometry and insert a new plane, I can then set the offset. So if I have that offset as 4mm, make sure that it's in the right direction. I could flip that if I wanted to, but it's already correct. Click OK. We've now got a plane that we can sketch onto. So if I click the plane and click a sketch, Control 8 to bring it normal to the screen, I can now sketch the sort of ribs. So I'm going to use the same origin. We've got the circle and then these lines here. So if I create one line and then I'll use a circular pattern, so I could either draw 3 lines and specify the angle, or I can use the circular sketch pattern feature. So if I select equal spacing of 360 degrees and I want 3, you can see there that it's automatically worked out that it's 120 degrees. So if you've got a lot of instances, obviously 360 divided by 3 is quite easy, but if you had 11 for example, then there it'll just save you using a calculator to work it out. So if I put that back to 3, click OK, we've still got to add a few more relations to fully define this sketch. If I just add a dimension on here, that was 12mm from the drawing. I'm going to have to change this later on, I'll explain why when I come to it. So if I make that 12, and then I also need to sort of fix the axis of this rotation of these parts. So you can see. So if I fix that with the origin, make it coincident, and then I can just make that sort of coincident with one of these edges. So now our sketch is fully defined. So if I go into features and then rib, I want that to be both sides. So if I make the thickness from the drawing was here 4mm, so if I increase that to 4, and then if I set the direction as downwards using that arrow, or I can use here flip material side. If I click OK, you can see we've got our rib feature. But this is where the problem was from earlier. So if you can see now we wanted the inner diameter of that rib to be 12 mil, whereas here you can see that it's 8 mil. So if I go back into the sketch, we need to change this as, so it's 12 mil plus 2 times 2 mil, so that'll be 16 mil in total. So if I change that to 16, I can then exit the sketch, and we've got our rib with the inner diameter as 12 mil. So we're pretty much there for the phase 1 drawing. If I just hide that plane, the last thing that we need to do is to add the fillets. So we've got the fillets on the rib and then the inside. So if I just show the bottom side, features, fillet. So I can even select all the faces individually, which is quite tedious. If I change that to 1, it's quite a lot of faces to select. Or there's a quicker way, so I can select the features. So if I delete all, if I clear the selections in here, if I then click the shell feature and the rib feature, you can see just using 2 clicks I've selected all of the inside surfaces. If I click OK, and there we have it. So that's the phase 1 drawing complete. I'll now show you how I go about doing the changes for the phase 2. So we've got some draft angles here on the rib features, and then we've got a draft angle on this on 2 of the faces on the front. So I'll do this draft angle here. So we've got a draft angle of 15 degrees. So if I go back, if I roll this back to the start using this bar here, if I roll that to just after this revolve, oops, just before the fillet and after the revolve. If I now use the draft feature, the neutral plane I'm going to set as the top plane, and then the faces to draft is this face here and this face here. So the pull direction, this arrow here, is sort of the direction that if you were to have a mould, you lift the mould out this way, so it's going to bring these 2 faces. I'll show you how to do it. If I put that as 15, you can see that it's now made those faces, so if you were to lift the mould, it'd be easy to lift. So I can now roll that back to the bottom, and then the fillets will still work because I selected the faces. Everything still works. So the last step I need to do is add the draft angle to this rib feature, which was 2 degrees. So I can do this separately using the draft feature or within the rib feature itself. If I go edit feature, there's the option in here to add a draft. If I select on, change that to 2 degrees, click OK. You can see there that we've got a draft angle of 2 degrees on there. So there it is. That's the part finished. So we've covered quite a lot of features here. We've used extruder bosses, we've done some cuts, we've done revolve features, we've done a shell feature, and we've done draft angles. So there it is. So as always, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below and we will answer them as soon as we can. Thank you.